It was the Tuesday evening after Thanksgiving weekend, the kind of raw, bone-cold November night in Toronto, when the sleet hits your windows like someone throwing gravel. I was back in my Yorkville condo, still wearing the wool dress I'd driven home in, trying to wash the scent of my family's latest performance off my skin in a scalding shower. Then my phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. Not a text, an email. The subject line was 8 words, all capitals, flagged with that red exclamation mark that never means anything good. Urgent notice of default and acceleration. I wrapped myself in a towel, water still dripping onto the heated floor, and opened it right there. The email was from a private commercial lender out of Mississauga, one I'd never heard of in my life. My eyes skimmed past the legalese, past the jurisdictional clauses, until 2 things punched me square in the chest. First, my name, Clara Aldridge Wen, listed as the primary personal guarantor. Second, the number, $620,000, Canadian. My blood didn't run cold. It stopped moving entirely. This wasn't some visa statement. This was a commercial mortgage tied to a numbered Ontario corporation I'd never heard of, and a default of that size wouldn't just destroy my credit. It wouldn't just force me to sell my condo. It would be reported to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. It could cost me my license to practice medicine. Have you ever felt like the only adult in a family full of grown children? Tell me about it in the comments below, because I promise you, what happened next is going to make you feel less alone. My hands weren't trembling from fear. They were trembling from something older, colder, and a lot more useful. On the granite counter beside my laptop, still warm from the printer, sat a certified check stub, $42,000. I had placed that check into my mother's hands myself, 3 days earlier. At the Thanksgiving dinner she hosted every year at the Red Brick Victorian in Rosedale, she kept calling our family seat. It was supposed to be the final payment, the last intervention. The money that would finally stop Scotiabank from calling in the line of credit on the house my mother paraded around the junior league as proof of her pedigree. I stared at that check stub, and I felt something inside my chest begin flipping through pages. Not memories, a ledger, because that's what I had been. Not a daughter, not a sister. A silent institutional lender to a family that kept performing solvency for an audience of one themselves. I thought about the e-transfers. $22,000 over 18 months to fund my younger sister Bethany's so-called wellness brand, a line of organic goat milk skincare that never made it past the branded Instagram grid. I thought about the Holt Renfrew charge I'd quietly covered, $11,000 for a single Chanel handbag that my mother had draped over her wrist at a Princess Margaret gala, while telling the room how exhausting it was to be the matriarch of a legacy family. I thought about every RRSP contribution I'd skipped, every vacation I'd postponed, every time I'd walked out of sick kids after a 26-hour shift and opened my banking app to see another withdrawal. I hadn't authorized in spirit, but had approved in silence. I had always paid. I paid to stop the teary voicemails left at 3 a.m. I paid to avoid being called cold. I paid to preserve the fragile transactional peace we all agreed to call a family. And I had always asked myself the same question. Why me? Why was I, the pediatric cardiothoracic fellow at Sick Kids who spent her best years inside a sterile operating theater, repairing the hearts of newborns, the one everyone expected to rescue the people who had never once rescued me? Now, staring at that check stub in the sterile blue light of a default notice, I finally understood. It wasn't love. It wasn't loyalty. It was the tax you pay for being the competent child in a family built on performance. In a household like mine, capability isn't a virtue. It's a utility. My scholarships, my residency match, my name attached to 3 published papers in the Canadian Journal of Cardiology, none of it was a source of pride to them. It was inventory, an asset to be liquidated slowly, gracefully, and always with a smile for the neighbors. My phone lit up again, a text from Bethany. Mom says you got some kind of scary-looking letter. You're being so dramatic, Clar. It's literally just a bank thing. Just a bank thing. My medical license was just a bank thing. Seconds later, a second text. This one from my mother, Clara Elizabeth. I don't know what you think is happening, but you are creating an enormous mess for this family. You will call me tonight and we will fix this. Do not make me ask twice. I read the word fix. I read the word mess. My stomach turned over once and then it settled, because there was no apology. There was no, my God, Clara, how could this have happened to you? There wasn't a single syllable of shame. They weren't panicking. They were managing me. The same way they had managed me since I was 11 years old, and started handing over my paper route money to cover their cash flow problems. The rage I expected never came. What came instead was something quiet and surgical. something I recognized from the OR. The focus that arrives in the third hour of a complex repair when the patient is 6 pounds on the table and everyone in the room is breathing in rhythm with you. They thought I was their emergency fund. They were about to meet the auditor. I didn't call my mother back. I didn't call Bethany back. I opened my contacts, scrolled past my attending and the on-call nurse and my ex-husband's new wife, and I tapped on the name I had kept in my phone for almost a decade without ever actually needing to use. Priya Narang. Priya is not the lawyer you call to fight over a patio fence. She's a forensic litigator at a boutique firm on Bay Street, the kind of woman who has testified before the Senate Banking Committee in Ottawa and once made a Bay Street partner cry on cross-examination. She picked up on the second ring. Clara, it's 9 on a Tuesday. I know, I said. My voice was flat and level, the same voice I used to announce cross-clamp times to a surgical team. I have a situation. I've just received a notice of default on a commercial mortgage I never co-signed. The amount is $620,000. The primary guarantor is listed as me. There was a pause on her end, just the soft click of a keyboard. Who are the other guarantors? My mother, Eleanor Aldridge. My sister, Bethany Aldridge. The corporate borrower is a 2019 Ontario numbered company I have never heard of in my life. The signature page has my name on it. It is not my signature. I see, Priya said. All the casual friend voice had drained out of her in the space of one sentence. What are you asking me to do, Clara? Everything, I said. Full credit freeze with Equifax and TransUnion tonight. An emergency ex parte injunction tomorrow morning at Superior Court. A forensic audit on every account, every joint holding, every line of credit my name has ever touched. I want every document you can pull. I want to know how deep this goes. Understood. Forward me the notice. I'll start now. And Clara? Yes. Don't call your mother tonight. Don't answer if she calls you. If Bethany shows up at your door, don't open it. From this moment forward, every interaction is evidence. I hung up. I walked to my laptop, created a new encrypted folder on my cloud drive, and named it simply The File. I dropped the default notice into it. This wasn't going to be a scrapbook. This was going to be a case. Just after midnight, Priya called back. Her voice was different now. Heavier. Clara, this is worse than I thought. How? It isn't a typical commercial mortgage. It's a secured commercial loan from a private lender, and there is an acceleration clause buried in the definition schedule. The moment the borrower missed the September payment, the entire $620,000 became immediately due and payable. But that isn't the real problem. I waited. Outside my window, the sleet had turned to proper snow, the first real snow of the season, muffling the city. The real problem, she continued, is that as the primary personal guarantor, the lender can and will pursue you personally. Your condo, your non-registered investments, your checking accounts. But beyond that, a commercial default of this magnitude, attached to an incorporated entity, is a reportable event to the college. They can and will review whether this constitutes conduct unbecoming a physician. Clara, this could put your license on the table. My license. The one thing that was unambiguously mine. The one thing I had built from a scholarship at McGill through 4 years of medical school and 6 years of residency on 5 hours of sleep a night. They hadn't just stolen money from me. They had put a hand around the throat of the only life I had ever built for myself. Whatever daughter was left in me died on that hardwood floor. What remained was something simpler. Priya, I said. This isn't a defense. This is a resection. Where's the first incision? Emergency injunction at 9 tomorrow morning. We freeze every asset tied to your mother and sister in this province. We prove the forgery. We sever you from them so thoroughly that neither of them will be able to lease a Honda Civic in Ontario ever again. Do it. The next afternoon, I was between cases at Sick Kids, still in my scrubs when Priya called me from the hallway outside a courtroom at 330 University. Clara, I've been in the weeds on this loan file all morning. The forgery is clean. A handwriting examiner could prove it in 20 minutes. That isn't what I want to talk to you about. Then what? The loan wasn't brokered by your mother. I stopped walking. The sterile beeping of the cardiac monitors in the step-down unit behind me faded to nothing. What do you mean? The original mortgage broker, the person who actually put this deal together with the private lender, is listed as a man named Theodore Aldridge Wen. He is your uncle. The hallway tilted. That's not possible, I said. My uncle Theo died 22 years ago, in a car accident on Highway 401 outside Kingston. My mother told us he was drunk behind the wheel. We buried an empty casket because there wasn't enough of him left to recover. Priya was very quiet. Clara, I ran a records check on Theodore Aldridge Wen through Service Ontario, through the Canada Revenue Agency filings I could access, and through the College of Architects. Your Uncle Theo has a current Ontario driver's license. He filed taxes last year. He has a firm in Vancouver. He is alive. And he's scheduled to walk into my office at 4 o'clock this afternoon. I'd very much like you to be there. I don't remember driving from the hospital to Priya's office on King West. I remember the snow, and I remember the smell of my own wool coat, and I remember standing in the glass-walled conference room looking at a man in his early 60s in an impeccable charcoal suit, silver at the temples, with the same crooked left eyebrow I saw every morning in the mirror. He stood up when I came in. He didn't reach for me. He just looked at me for a long moment and said, "You have your father's eyes." "Clara." My throat closed. "They told us you were dead." "I know," he said, a small, sad smile. "That was the version of the story your mother found most useful. Please, sit." I sat. I didn't take my coat off. He didn't take his eyes off me. "The truth is, I was the co-founder," he said. "Your father and I started the firm together in 1987. I was the partner with the financial and legal training. Your father was the visionary, the face of the practice. When he died, your mother and I disagreed. I wanted to keep building. I wanted to keep the firm intact and to honor his name. She wanted to sell everything, cash out, and move to Rosedale. So she had me pushed out. She forged my signature on a buyout agreement drafted by a family friend who has since been disbarred. Then she told the entire family I had been drinking, that I had been embezzling, and that I had driven into a ditch on the 401. For 22 years, I have lived in Vancouver under my mother's maiden name. I rebuilt my career there. I couldn't speak. You knew? I finally whispered. You knew this whole time, and you let me. Yes, he said. I have been quietly monitoring your mother's financial filings for 2 decades. I saw every corporate registration she opened and closed. I saw the money move. I saw you make the transfers. Then why, I said, and I heard my own voice crack for the first time in a decade. Why didn't you come for me? He leaned forward. This was the moment. I could feel it the way I could feel a patient's heart start to fibrillate beneath my hand. Because, Clara, I couldn't save someone who wasn't ready to save herself. For years, I watched you pay for their approval. I watched you fund Bethany's disasters and your mother's charity gowns. I watched you willingly participate in a lie because it was less painful than the truth. If I had walked through that door when you were 26 or 30, or even last Christmas, you would have let your mother talk you back inside. I wasn't waiting for the loan. I was waiting for the moment you decided you were done. The $620,000 wasn't the emergency. It was the signal. Then he delivered the second blow. There's something else you should know. When your mother forced me out, I made sure of one thing. I made sure that she could never burn what your father built without consequence. Every dollar she has lived on for 22 years, the Rosedale house, the BMW, Bethany's tuition at Western, the Muskoka cottage comes from a discretionary family trust I established and continue to administer as sole trustee. And there is a clause in that trust, Clara, drafted into its foundational documents and reviewed by 3 separate firms, a good faith clause. It states that if any beneficiary commits a fraudulent, illegal, or predatory act against another member of this family, particularly against a direct descendant of your father, their interest in the trust is immediately and irrevocably forfeited. Everything reverts to the remaining beneficiaries. He looked at Priya, then he looked at me. Your mother didn't just hand you a weapon when she forged your name, Clara. She handed me the authority to pull the trigger. The emergency injunction landed on a Thursday morning at 9:02 a.m. The asset freeze order was served by process servers at the Rosedale house, at Bethany's condo in Liberty Village, and at the accountant's office on Richmond Street, where my mother kept her private books. And then there was silence. 3 days of it. No texts from Bethany, no voicemails from my mother, nothing but the quiet hum of Priya's paralegals building a case file that eventually ran to 1,100 pages. On the 4th night, there was a knock on my door. Not at the lobby buzzer downstairs. At my unit door, on the 27th floor of a building with keycard elevators. Somehow, she had gotten past the concierge. I already knew before I looked through the peephole. My mother. But not the mother I'd had lunch with at the Windsor Arms the previous month, the one with blown-out hair and the silk scarf from Hermes. This woman's hair was limp against her scalp. Her mascara had dried in gray tracks halfway down her cheeks. Her camel hair coat was wrinkled. The performance had finally cracked. I opened the door. Not wide. I kept my body in the gap, the way you would block a patient's family from entering a trauma bay. "Clara," she gasped, and her hand shot out toward my sleeve. "Clara, my baby, thank God. You have to stop this. You have to stop this right now." I didn't move. I didn't step back. I stood in the doorway with the weight of my entire life braced behind me. Her face crumpled on cue. The tears came on schedule, exactly the way they had when I was 9 and refused to give her my birthday money, exactly the way they had when I was 19 and told her I was going to McGill instead of staying in Toronto. Clara, please, you don't understand what you're doing. That man, Theodore, he is lying to you. He abandoned this family. He is poisoning you against your own blood, against the people who raised you. My family, I said. The words came out flatter than I expected. Clinical. Yes, us, me. Bethany. I am your mother, Clara. Are you? She flinched like I'd hit her. After everything I have sacrificed for you, name one thing. The words were out of my mouth before I decided to say them. She froze. She actually froze. Her mouth opened and then closed. And for the first time in my 33 years of life, I watched my mother search her own memory for a single sacrifice she had made on my behalf and come up empty. I had paid for my own braces. I had paid my own university tuition after first year. I had bought her the winter coat she was wearing. And we both knew it. I'm not destroying anything, Mom, I said, and my voice was as steady as it had ever been over an anesthetized 6-pound infant. I am not the one who forged a signature on a $620,000 loan. I am not the one who put a physician's license in the hands of a private lender. I am not the one who violated the good faith clause of your brother-in-law's family trust. Her face went the color of wet paper. She hadn't known I knew about the trust. You don't understand how any of this works, she stammered. It was paperwork. It was a temporary thing. Bethany needed the numbered company for her new venture. You have so much, Clara. You just needed an asset. I finished for her. And when I stopped volunteering, you decided to take one by force. You have to fix this, she said. And the old imperious tone slid back over her voice like a mask fitting back into place. You call your lawyer. You call Theodore. You tell them to end this now, tonight, and we will never speak of it again. No, it was the first time in my 33 years that I had ever said that word to my mother and meant it. The second time was easier. No, I said again. I stepped back from the door, reached for the manila folder Priya had couriered to my building that morning, and held it out. Inside was a copy of Theodore's sworn affidavit, a copy of the signed ex parte injunction, and a copy of the trust deed with the good faith clause highlighted in yellow. These are your options, Mom. Not mine. You are not upset because you made a mistake. You are upset because you finally got caught. Her hands shook as she took the folder. She didn't look at the papers. She looked at me, and then the mask fell off entirely. What was underneath was not a mother. It was raw, stripped, animal entitlement. You will regret this. I have regretted the last 22 years, I said. I won't regret this. I stepped back, and I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it with both hands, slowly and deliberately, the way you close the door on an operating theater after the patient has been wheeled to recovery. Through the peephole, I watched her stand there for a full minute, motionless, staring at the door like it was something she had never seen before. Then I picked up my phone, opened the building security app, found Aldridge, Eleanor family in the guest list, and pressed revoke. A notification popped up on my screen 30 seconds later. Unauthorized access attempt at the 27th floor elevator. I watched the camera feed. I watched my mother stab at the keypad 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and I watched the little red light flash back at her over and over. I turned off the feed. The excision was complete. The trial wasn't really a trial. It was a procession. My mother and Bethany had been forced to retain counsel, a junior partner from a mid-size firm who clearly regretted accepting the file the moment the disclosure package arrived on his desk. He tried family misunderstanding. He tried a daughter misinterpreting her mother's estate planning. He tried to paint me as cold, estranged, ungrateful. Then Priya stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She laid down exhibits like she was dealing a hand of cards. Exhibit A, the loan document, with my forged signature projected side by side with 3 verified notarized samples of my real one, under magnification. The differences were obvious from the back row. Exhibit B, a forensic accountant's report documenting $22,000 in unauthorized transfers, the Holt Renfrew charge, the Muskoka cottage renovations, every dollar traced. Exhibit C, Theodore's sworn affidavit, along with the original 1,987 articles of incorporation for my father's architectural firm and the statement of trust establishing the discretionary family trust in 2003. Exhibit D, the good faith clause, black ink on white paper, plain enough that a grade 9 student could have read it and understood. The judge took 43 minutes. He looked at my mother with an expression of tired, cold contempt I will never forget. This court does not confuse a coordinated fraud with a clerical misunderstanding, he said. Then he delivered the ruling like a series of nails. The loan was declared void, as to Clara Aldridge Wen. My name was to be scrubbed from every document and every lender record. A copy of the ruling would be sent to the College of Physicians and Surgeons with a letter from the court explaining that the defendant had been the victim, not the perpetrator. The good faith clause was ruled validly activated. The trust was to be dissolved in the manner specified by its founding documents, with the trustees' discretion confirmed. The Rosedale House, the Muskoka Cottage, and the BMW were to be seized and liquidated to pay the private lender whose money my mother had tried to drop on my head. And then, almost as an afterthought, the judge turned to the Crown representative sitting quietly in the gallery and said that the evidence of forgery and fraud was being referred to the RCMP Financial Crime Unit for consideration of charges under Sections 366 and Beta 380 of the Criminal Code. My mother would be arrested on a Tuesday morning in a rented studio apartment in Etobicoke 3 weeks later. Bethany would plead out for a conditional sentence and mandatory restitution. I watched my mother in the courtroom as the judgment came down, and I watched the performance that had run unchallenged in her face for 62 years, finally, quietly, collapse. Bethany was sobbing openly, but she wasn't crying for my mother. She was crying for the cottage. She was crying for the handbag. She was crying because the life she had never earned was being taken back. That evening, Theodore met me in the lobby of my building. He didn't say I told you so. He didn't celebrate. He just reached into the inside pocket of his coat and put something into my hand. A brass key, old, with a leather tag stamped with a faded address in Cabbagetown. "What is this?" I asked. "This," he said, "is the key to the loft your father designed in 1992, the one he and I ran the firm out of for almost a decade. Your mother sold it to a developer the year after she forced me out. I bought it back last Tuesday at the Ontario Superior Court asset sale. I closed my fingers around the key. It was heavier than it should have been." "It isn't a gift, Clara," Theodore said. "It's a restoration. I'm retiring at the end of the year. The firm is yours if you want it. Not the building, the name. Aldridge Wen Architecture is your father's name, and it's your name, and it belongs to whoever is willing to build with it, honestly. You can let it sit, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want. But I wanted you to know it existed. I drove to Cabbagetown that night. I let myself into the loft. It smelled of old wood and cold plaster. On the far wall, under a sheet that hadn't been lifted in 22 years, I found a framed blueprint in my father's handwriting. A children's hospital he had designed on spec and never built. There were notes in the margins, in his handwriting, about natural light in post-operative wards and the importance of soft ceiling angles in pediatric spaces. I sat on the dusty floor in a $2,000 wool coat and I cried for the first time in 10 years. That night, back in my condo, I opened my laptop one last time. On the desktop was the encrypted folder, the file. I opened it. I looked at everything. The default notice, the scanned forgery, the screenshot of Bethany's text, the bank statements, the court stamps, red and final. The whole meticulous, ugly record of my betrayal. I highlighted the folder. I right-clicked. Delete. I emptied the trash. I stood at the window and I watched the city. Snow was falling properly now, the kind of heavy prairie-edge snow that blankets King Street and silences the streetcars. And I realized something. For my entire life, I had believed that my mother and my sister were my roots, that they were the thing that kept me upright. That cutting them off would mean coming loose from the ground. I was wrong. They weren't roots. They were an anchor. And the thing nobody tells you about anchors is that they don't keep you safe. They keep you in one place. They keep you in the mud, watching everyone else's ship move while you tell yourself the stillness is love. Cutting an anchor isn't betrayal. It is not cruelty. It is not the failure of a daughter. It is the first and most necessary act of mercy you will ever perform on yourself. Thank you for listening to my story tonight. If you've ever cut an anchor of your own, or if you're standing on the deck tonight with a pair of bolt cutters in your hand, wondering whether you have the right, I want to hear about it in the comments below. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you felt anything sail loose inside your own chest tonight, hit that like button. I'll see you in the next story.